So I think we'll kick off. Thank you all so much for coming. It's really, really kind. And I hope you'll enjoy this morning's event, which we're recording. So if you would prefer not to be seen, do turn your camera off. Can everybody hear me all right? Okay, so let's go. So hello, everyone. Welcome to our second Private House Stays talk. Thank you so much for joining. If you found us online and you don't know us yet, my name is Cassie Bouverie and I'm the founder and owner of Private House Stays, an online holiday accommodation site that helps educate small property owners to take more direct bookings, as well as driving new business to them through our award-winning website, scottishvacations.com. I ran my own bed and breakfast for 12 years in Edinburgh, and whilst I was doing that, I found it very frustrating that people wanted to send me guests but take 20% of my taking. So we really went about trying to create a widget which sits on people's website to help them drive commission-free bookings. We're a Visit Scotland partner, and we also have a channel manager which links up to all the booking sites, and you'll see here several of our team who have taken on through the Kickstart scheme. Today we're going to be hearing from two wonderful writers, Emma Greer and Neely Khan, about how to tell your story on your website copy. This is a really great way you can improve customer trust. People love to see the human face behind a business, and we all have a story to tell. It can be difficult knowing how best to present ourselves online. First, we're going to hear from Neely. I first met Neely through our Book Direct show last autumn, which was held in Tobacco Dock in Wapping, where she gave a wonderful talk on how storytelling can be used in our industry. Neely specializes in story-led content and will be talking to us today about what makes corporate storytelling different to personal storytelling, as well as how to write for your ideal guest. She has a wide range of experience when it comes to storytelling. Outside of travel and short-term rental content, she writes fiction stories, wonderful poetry, with her first collection due to be published in April this year. She has a really great grasp of the psychology of storytelling, which we hope will be really useful for you. Neely has her own business, Neely There, the link for which we will put in the chat for you now, and is looking to relocate to Scotland with her young daughter in the near future. Welcome, Neely.
Thank you so much, Cassie. Thank you for that introduction, and thank you for the entire team. I'm so excited to be here today and to talk about my favorite thing in the world, which is, of course, storytelling. I know Cassie has mentioned that I'm going to briefly sort of offer an overview of the difference between personal storytelling and corporate storytelling, which does sound like a bit of just business jargon, but I think before you get into the nooks and crannies of what storytelling is, and before you start implementing it into your hospitality business, it's really important to understand the difference between the two. So in a nutshell, personal storytelling is probably the kind of storytelling that we're most familiar with. So when you see people talking about themselves, their companies, their personal sort of experiences, the kind of content you see on somebody's about page on their website, those are all examples of personal storytelling. When you leverage your own experiences and your own stories, and you use that to gain greater brand exposure and to make a connection with your audience. Corporate storytelling, on the other hand, and this is something that I do probably more of with my clients, and I find to be the more commercially impactful way of using storytelling, is when you place your guests, your audience, at the heart of the stories that you're telling. I think the very first thing that I would say when it comes to storytelling for your hospitality business, and I'm sure Emma will agree with me here, is that it is all about your guests. If you think of a typical story, you think of a hero, you think of their problem, you think of their solution. When you're creating corporate stories for your brand, it's always your guest that's the hero of that story. So for example, if you're offering, short stay accommodation, the hero of the brand stories that you're telling would be your ideal guests. The solution would obviously be the product and the service you're offering, and you're simply stepping in as their aid, kind of like the Robin to Batman, so to speak. And I think that's probably the most fundamental difference, and probably the key thing I share with people when we're working on their content in a story-led way. So it's always about the guests. Yes, you can use your own experiences, and of course you should, but everything must be centered around your guests, how you can benefit them. So yeah, that would be my first point about that. Now, when it comes to actually the psychology of storytelling, and again, like Cassie said, I talk about this a lot and I do this a lot. The best way I can describe stories is by comparing it to tomato ketchup, which sounds quite bizarre, but I'll tell you why. So I have a little girl who is 10 years old, and I am a single parent. And when I first started out in my writing career, I encountered quite a few struggles. It was quite difficult. We lived on like instant noodles all the time. And my priority was always giving my daughter Sophia the nourishment she needed with the little money that I had. So I used to kind of try and put vegetables and, healthy things in her rice and in her noodles and stuff. And unfortunately, my daughter was very much the kind of a toddler where she wouldn't want to eat anything that was good for her. So I thought to myself, what can I do to make this more, interesting for her, to make it more, appealing for her to eat? So one day I decided to just dip some of her vegetables in tomato ketchup. And lo and behold, she licked her dinner plate clean that day. And that's something that I then continued to do. Now, if you think about stories are like the tomato ketchup that I used on Sophia's vegetables, so to speak. Stories wrap facts and information. Sometimes we need to communicate things with our audience that maybe aren't that exciting, that maybe aren't as, appealing or as interesting, but they're things that we need to communicate. So if you think, for example, you want to talk about the features of your accommodation, you want to talk about statistics, yes, that's all valuable information. But the minute you wrap stories around that valuable information, its value increases tenfold. And, scientists and writers and researchers and memory experts will all tell you that the minute you wrap a story around any piece of information, it becomes far more memorable, far more emotionally engaging, because stories are, of course, they're not about words. They're not necessarily about being the best writer in the world, but of course that helps. They're about understanding feelings. When you're telling stories, you're tapping into people's emotions. Stories do an amazing thing of tension and release. That's why we enjoy them so much. When we read a story, we're going through the up and downs of it. The best stories in the world aren't just good, 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 or bad, bad, bad. They help us release all kinds of different chemicals like cortisol and endorphins, and that's what creates that emotional connection. When you make that impact on your audience, you'll find that you'll have created an audience that is ready to take action, that is ready to book with you, that is ready to maybe buy an extra with you because they've already emotionally invested in your brand. So I would definitely say, when it comes to storytelling on your website, first thing, always understand who you're writing for, your guests. Ensure that everything you're writing is about them, and understand what their pain points are, understand what kind of emotions you need to tap into. And then you will find that the writing bit, the content creation part, that kind of comes naturally, it happens. The content that you create and the stories that you create end up being a consequence of all of that other research that you've done. So yeah, I'm not sure if I've talked too much, if I've talked too little. I think Cassie will tell me. That's my...
No, it's been absolutely fantastic. I mean, could you just tell our viewers, some of the people that you've helped with, your writing skills, how many, your clients you're working with? I think, have you done stuff for Airbnb, I think?
Yes, so I've worked with clients who list their properties on Airbnb and use OTAs like Airbnb and Booking.com. I work with a lot of accommodation providers who are very, very niche, who started out knowing who their target demographic was because they have a very offering, whether it's something like a countryside estate or city breaks or things like that, really niche audiences. And while they've understood the commercial side of their business and what they're actually offering, I've worked with them to help them create brand stories, which in turn, and what creating a brand story does is it helps you create an identity for your business. And that then in turn helps you create a tone of voice. For example, using the right words, using the right semantic fields. Again, you then ensure that you're connecting with the right people. And, you're no longer having to go out and sort of fish your audience out. They're kind of coming to you. So in terms of how I've helped brands, it's very much been a case of helping them understand their identity, their tone of voice. A lot of that is so easy to do, but I think projecting that onto your website is actually very difficult. Because people often think of their websites and they think, well, this is my homepage, this is my about page, there's only so much information I can put on here. A lot of people are sometimes under the misconception, which I completely understand, that how can you fit an entire story onto your websites? Because a story should have a beginning, middle, and an end, which it absolutely should. And it should be pages and pages long, which is not always the case. Your headline on your website homepage could be telling a story within itself. You're 3 clicks away from a countryside escape. If that was your main heading on your website, that within itself is a story. It's offering a solution. It's tapping into a problem. You're already identifying who your target audience is. So that's, what I help people understand and then help them put that into words as well, because there's a real sort of technical aspect to it as well. I kind of come in both ways there. Yeah,
I'm sure that. And Neely, would you be able to send us a few sort of links to some work you've done, so we can send them to everyone who's because I find learning and looking at other people's examples of what they've written actually really helps, so we can sort of all learn from each other.
Absolutely, I'd love to. Yeah.
And you were talking about is it semantics?
Yeah, I think I might have mentioned the word semantic
What
field.
does that mean? What does that mean? Sorry, I'm just so I understand.
No, thank you for asking. I should have mentioned that too, actually. So a semantic field, it's a linguistic term that we use in English writing. A semantic field basically refers to a group of words that cater to a specific theme, whether it's for a story or style of content. So a really simple example would be if you're creating an offer.
Oops. Neely, we lost you there for a second.
Oh, okay. Did we get the Valentine's Day part or?
Well, I didn't. I don't know whether anybody else did.
Okay, I'll start again. So,
Sorry.
No, that's okay, don't worry. So a semantic field is a linguistic term we use in English writing, and it refers to a group of words that cater to a specific theme, whether that theme be for a story or for a piece of content. So a really simple example of that would be, say, for example, Valentine's Day is just gone. If you're creating a piece of content for that specific day of the year, Valentine's Day, your semantic field would inherently be romance, love, all the good stuff. So then straight away that the words you're using within your copy need to kind of cater to that theme, if that makes sense. So instead of saying our property is located among the mountains, you could say something like it's nestled, it's cradled, it's idyllically, situated. You'd use softer words. And, there's a great deal of psychology behind that too, because once people start sort of reading those words, sometimes even without knowing, you immediately have that emotional sort of impact on them. So it's little things like that, it's understanding what words to use, even, the kind of sentences you use, longer sentences, You know, obviously when it comes to website copy, it's quite different because your content should be quite impactful anyway. But yeah, the actual technical aspects of writing are actually so important too. But that's something that, you know, you can work with a professional with, or, you know, that stuff is a little bit easier to learn. But I think it's great to have an understanding of it. 100%. Yeah.
Thank you, Neely. Well, I know there'll be lots of questions at the end, but what we'll do is we'll go on and we'll talk to Emma now, I'm really keen to make it interactive. So please do put any questions you have in the chat function, because we will be watching it, and we'll obviously, if we're unable to answer all your questions, we'll get back to you at the end of the webinar or after the webinar. But I just wanted to say thank you, Neely. That was so interesting. I just want to introduce you to Emma Greer, who will be talking about her experience using storytelling in the domestic travel sector. She worked for over 3 years as a domestic marketing executive for award-winning tour operator McKinley Kidd. Some of you will probably have already heard of them. And now she works with small businesses and entrepreneurs to refine their target audience and convert them into customers through the power of words. She will also be sharing with us her 4 top storytelling tips for accommodation providers, which we're excited to hear. Emma has her own copywriting business called Magnetic Copy, the link for which we'll put into the chat box now. So welcome, Emma. Thank you so much. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much for having me this morning, Cassie. It's great to be here. And thanks, Neely, as well, for your wonderful insight on storytelling. Neely's been doing this for a bit longer than I have, so it's just wonderful to be able to learn from someone so experienced in this way. But as Cassie said, my specialism, certainly before I started my own business, was in the domestic travel space. My first job was actually as a content writer at Barhead Travel, just after I finished uni. So I did, huge brand campaigns through them on a variety of different platforms. But I really fell in love with the domestic sector when I worked at McKinley Kidd. So I know certainly for the accommodation businesses that are on this call today, hopefully 2021 is going to be the first full season of travel that everyone is going to have had since 2019. I am keeping my fingers crossed for everyone. But I also know there's some unique challenges and unique opportunities this year in a way there hasn't been before, and that it's almost a twofold approach you're going to have to take to getting people to come back to you. And that's number one, encouraging the domestic travelers whose hands were essentially tied. And if they wanted to travel for the last 2 years when they could travel, a lot of people were holidaying closer to home than they typically would. So it's about keeping those people coming back to the areas, particularly in Scotland, that we know and love. And then number two, it's about bringing back those overseas visitors who typically spend a bit more time here and also spend a little bit more money as well. And certainly getting those direct bookings is going to be absolutely key. Just as Neely said, the reason that storytelling works is we are emotional beings kind of by nature, and the more effective, descriptive and creative a story you can tell, the more, basically what you're trying to do is get people to imagine themselves in the situation. You're getting people emotionally invested. As Neely said, no story is just happy, 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 or sad, sad, sad all the time. You're wanting to have these peaks and dips to get people really emotionally invested in the outcome. And ultimately, certainly in a domestic travel or domestic tourism setting, what you're trying to do is get people to picture themselves coming to stay with you and coming to stay in your area. And that's why this Visit Scotland theme this year is such a gift, the Year of Stories, because there's so many different ways you can play with that. So as Cassie said, I'm going to go through my top 4 tips for effective storytelling, not just for the travel space, but these can be applied across the board. And then I'm going to give a couple of examples of just how you can implement these on the different channels that I work on with my clients, which is website copywriting, email marketing, and blog writing, because each requires a slightly different approach. So my number 1 tip for effective storytelling in this space is show your expertise. because it's really important, I think, as the local expert that somebody's coming to stay with, that you really showcase that knowledge. Travelers aren't typically, I would argue, looking for these run-of-the-mill, super touristy experiences anymore. They're wanting local insight, to engage with local people, to have this interaction with local culture. And you are so uniquely positioned to deliver this for people that you really should be singing it from the rooftops. I recently actually have just booked a trip to Orkney in June, and it's one of the few of the big Scottish islands that I haven't managed to get to yet. And I was thinking about this webinar as I was booking, because I was so surprised at just how few people were utilising storytelling on their website as a way to engage people and encourage them to become customers. So there's such an opportunity for you here. So when I say share your expertise, I mean, give people the kind of information that only you would know, the things that they can't find out from maybe YouTube videos or blogs when they're researching their holidays. The best place to get a local cup of coffee, an amazing viewpoint to watch a sunset, you know, lovely local walks that they can take to really immerse themselves in the scenery. This is the kind of information that you know, but they don't. And again, it's just about building up this visual picture in their minds about what it's like to come and stay with you. Tip number 2 is look at the world around you. And this is particularly in line with Visit Scotland's Year of Stories. So having worked at a domestic tour operator, I've been familiar with Visit Scotland's themed years in the past. And the Year of Stories is such a gift, because I know that it's easy to think that it's just based on, you know, literature and these fantastic books and stories that have been, you know, inspired by Scotland's landscapes and people. But actually, if you look on the Year of Stories page on the Visit Scotland website, which I would highly recommend you do if you're in this space, there's so many more themes that you can borrow from. So there's things like ghost stories, filming locations, ancient ruins, you know, local heritage, folklore, legends, things like that. Now, it's not going to be different for everyone depending on where you're based, but there will be something on that page that can spark your imagination. And again, it's just about showing your expertise in that way, because you've got a unique position on it, because naturally you're the person who lives there. So there's different ways that you can tell stories in this way. You know, you could perhaps partner with another local organization to run an event, or encourage people to take part in these local events, especially with the Year of Stories. There's so much going on around the country. But even more than that, looking at the world around you, you can take that even further in, and this just builds on something that Neely said, and just talk about the things that you've got in your accommodation that are very slightly different than what anybody else has to offer. So if you've got work by local artists on your walls, talk a little bit about the significance of that. If you use local suppliers for your breakfast or your dinner items, talk a little bit about that. Just build that picture. And just, again, the more detail and the more creative inspiration you can give to people, the more likely they are to turn from your readers into your guests. The third tip, and this is completely across the board, not just for the travel sector certainly, is absolutely, as Neely said, focus on emotion and not on rationale, because every decision we make is driven by emotion, and then we try and back it up and justify it to ourselves and justify it to other people through practical details. So getting the emotion right first, invoking feelings in people, is absolutely critical to telling a good story. And there's such simple ways you can do this on your website. So for example, if one of your bedrooms has a sea view, let's say, saying that it's a sea view room is fine, but you could literally embellish that just a little bit by talking about how people could watch the crashing waves, an amazing sunrise or a sunset from a comfortable chair. What kind of feeling is invoked whenever you hear that description? To me, it's a sense of peace, contentment, a real break from daily routine, a break from daily life, just little things like that. Again, it all comes back to bringing the experience to life for people, because the more they can visualize themselves staying with you, the more likely they are to think that they simply have to book now. And then number 4, and again, this is building on something that Neely said, we definitely are very aligned in the way we approach these things, and this is totally applicable across the board, is focus on, forget about I or we and focus on you. And what I mean by that is, when we're telling our own stories and we're talking about, you know, how we set up our businesses or how we got to where we are today, it can become a page of, and we did this and I did this and I am great, and all of that's fine. but it's only relevant in relation to what it means to your reader, because as Neely said, the reader or the guest needs to be absolutely at the heart of everything you are saying. So if you've won awards in the past, for example, that's great. If it's customer service, if it's for your food, that's amazing. But what does that actually mean for your customer? Does it mean that they're going to be welcomed like they're part of the family? Does it mean that they're going to have, you know, an award-winning breakfast to start their day, ready for, you know, the day's adventure and exploring? It's just about building out these small details that can have a huge impact. So hopefully that wasn't too much information overload. I'm going to go into a couple of different ways you can actually do this across different channels based on my experience, both working at McKinley Kids and then also just based on the kind of work I do now with my clients. So on your website, something that I have always found to be really effective across all industries, certainly, is to tell your story through the people who have already experienced it, because the kind of testimonials you can get from your guests are so powerful, because the way people are influenced has changed. People used to listen to, you know, people in charge of these big organizations and these huge thought leaders, but really people relate most to others who are like them. So what better way is there to tell the story of what it's like to stay with you than through the words of someone who has already done it, aka your past guests? Because that's literally you bringing the story to life. And it just, again, I'm just repeating myself, but it helps you get somebody to imagine themselves as the guest staying in your accommodation because they're reading somebody who's already done it. I would also say on your website, and this is a plug for Visit Scotland, and I promise I'm not sponsored by them, I just think they've got some great resources. They've got an amazing image library for any tourism organizations in Scotland to use. All you have to do is be part of the industry. You can access it for free. They've got some unbelievable images that you can use for free. It's just about crediting the photographers. So I would definitely recommend taking a look at that if you're short of some images of your area, because it's just another way to help bring the story to life. The second channel that I always recommend everybody has for their business, and I could talk about this for hours and I'm not going to, is email marketing, because it's such an amazing way to directly get in touch with people who have either previously stayed with you or have shown an interest in staying with you. You can personalize your content, you own your own list, and you can really tailor your communications. And an easy way to tell stories through email marketing is, again, to pick up on, for example, one of those Visit Scotland themes that I mentioned earlier that's relevant to your area. So let's say folklore or ghost stories is relevant to where you are. You can easily build out one email or a sequence of emails around this theme and send it out to people just to really encourage them to come and stay, because you're just giving a little bit more flavor to what the area is like. You're just showing them something that's a little bit different. And then the third one, and this is one I always recommend that travel businesses have, certainly, if not anyone else, that is blog writing. And I know Neely does some blog writing for her clients as well, and articles, because this is a way that you can really expand on detail that you maybe wouldn't want to put in your web pages if it isn't super relevant, but it's something that people might want or need to know. It's a great place to answer questions. It's a great place to position yourself as an expert in your industry, and you can add so much value with a blog. And again, the kind of themes that the Year of Stories have got going on, you could so easily write some articles about those amazing walks you can do nearby, about those viewpoints that are around your area, about the different places people should eat and drink nearby. It's all about creating an experience for people. So that's everything from me. I hope that has been helpful. One final thing just for the people on this call. I'm offering a limited number of free website audits to the people who have been on this call. So that's essentially where I look at what I call the good, bad, and the ugly on your website. So what's working well, what isn't working quite so well, and then actionable ways that you can make improvements. I'm quite busy with work at the minute, which is definitely a lovely thing to be able to say. So it's going to be a limited number. So I think Cassie is going to circulate contact details after this. So if that's something you're interested in, please do get in touch. And I always love to chat to people and provide insight. And if there's any way that you think I can help based on this call this morning, then please get in touch and let's have a chat. I would really, really love to talk in more detail.
Brilliant. Clap, clap, clap. Well done to both you and Neely. I mean, fantastic. Really, really useful insights. the asset library, Visit Scotland Asset Library, we use all the time. If I think you'll see in the chat, if you click onto that link, you can just say that you work in the accommodation industry and you can register, and then you can download images. Oliver, Megan, and Beth, who are on the call or on this webinar, they use it on pretty much a daily basis, because when we set up a new client on private house stays, Oliver, who's our content writer, will interview the owner, and then we'll find out what your favorite attractions and things are to do in that area, and we'll make sure that those are set up on private house stays. So this collaboration is so important, that we're all working together. And you I think both you, Neely, and Emma explained that so well. There was a couple of there was one question I was going to ask you is, for somebody who's never written a blog, how do you start? Where would you start? Because it's sort of like anything. It's like, I don't, I mean, I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it myself, but obviously Oliver helps me and Beth helps me with that. But how do you start?
Sure, no, absolutely. I think it's such a funny one, isn't it? Because I think you can sit down with the greatest of intentions of writing something, and then you actually practically start doing it and you're like, what have I done? Like, this is a mistake. I think the top one I would say, I would say certainly it's probably a bit easier to talk in this setting about your area and about what's going on, because it's something you know a lot about. To be honest, what I would do is start with writing about what interests you, because I think that's going to be the easiest thing. And again, like on the Visit Scotland Year of Stories website, I had a quick look this morning before I came on, and there's so many content prompts on there. And again, even if you just take one of those prompts and repurpose it for what it is that you have to offer, I think that could be really important, because it just makes the content inspiration side of things a little bit easier, because I know that's something that people can really struggle with. It's I haven't written a blog in a month. What do I write a blog about this month type thing? Like I've seen it happen to people so many times. And it's absolutely just about getting your unique angle on it. And I would say certainly, if writing isn't your strength, you can use loads of pictures and things like that, and just talk about things from your experience, especially if it's from your local area. You will have experienced these things firsthand. So as Neely said, it's not about being the best writer in the world, although that does help. It's just about having a slightly unique angle on something and saying something that's a little bit different in quite a crowded space.
Brilliant. So, Emma, that's great advice. So now I'm going to ask you another question is, if you're not technical, where would you start? How I mean, you're telling us how to use the words, but how do you then,
Yes.
how do you, I mean, do you go to a blog company or?
It really depends. Like it's something, certainly with all content, sometimes it can be helpful to get an outside perspective, and I'm sure Neely will agree with that. I think we can get so bogged down in the day-to-day and the fine details about what it is we're doing that we struggle to see the big picture. So sometimes having somebody come in who just has that broader perspective and doesn't have that same amount of deep knowledge can be really good in terms of generating these ideas. It could just be, talking to people around you, seeing what they find interesting. Like there's so many different ways of doing it. I think from a structure standpoint, certainly something that can be helpful, because I know that looking at a blank page can be absolutely terrifying. Like I do understand that. So if you were going to say, write about, as an example, 5 local walks you can take in the area, just literally pick them and then bullet point your points, and then just try and flesh them out into larger paragraphs from there, and then build them out with pictures. Try and make things as easy as possible for yourself, I think, when you're creating content. So having a number of things that you're going to cover, for example, and keep it short if that's what you need as well, because it's better to have something that's high quality than lots of quantity and you're really struggling to put something together, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no. And Neely, have you got any advice on blog writing?
Yeah, so I think it's the most common question, the whole idea of where do I start? I would say the irony of writing or creating any kind of content. Now, blogs are quite different, because obviously you want to, your blogs should do either one of these things, or if even better, all three of these things, they should engage, entertain, and educate your target audience. Now, the irony of writing is that the best writing and the best content is actually involves about 10% actually writing. And this is the most fundamental thing, I think, to remember. I really truly believe when people talk about things like writer's block, when they talk about blank page syndrome, when you look at a blank page and you don't know where to start, I think a lot of that stems from either not having really researched what it is that you want to write about properly. And a lot of people will say, well, I have researched it because I've read so many of the blog posts, but there must be a disconnect there somewhere. If you're really struggling to kind of create those ideas. And I mean this with the sort of nicest of intentions. I think things like writer's block, blank page syndrome, it usually comes from a place of there needs to be a little bit more back work before you can even think about putting pen to paper. Once you've gotten to that point and you understand truly what it is that you want to write about, because it really is, I know it sounds quite airy-fairy, but it really is a mindset thing. You know, people kind of, a lot of us kind of fall into the trap of thinking, because I'm not a professional writer, I can't write anything engaging, but actually nobody understands your own business better than yourself. That's why obviously it exists. Then we come to the point of, oh, what words do I use? What kind of sentence structures and stuff? Those are things you can always address a little bit later on anyway. It's very, I mean, lots of people have said this in the past because it's brilliant advice. The whole idea of write how you would speak, more importantly, write how your guests would speak. Don't get too bogged down with, you know, with the detail right at the beginning. Write something that you feel will connect with your target audience. And then if you do have the budget for it, some people maybe don't have the budget to outsource to a content writer, but get somebody else to, you know, to read it for you, whether that's your target audience, whether that's somebody who has some experience in writing. The best person you can ask is somebody who's maybe a little bit younger, because, you know, your sort of your language should be easy enough for, you know, a child to understand really, and also engage with an adult as well. So, you know, it is very much a case of trial and error. I think where the quality of it is concerned, like Emma said so well, you're much better off creating quality content rather than creating content just for the sake of content. I think that's the biggest mistake a lot of businesses make. They'll just start churning out very, very sort of regurgitating seeming sort of blog posts, which can actually do more harm to your brand than good. If you're going to share content, then have some finesse about it, make it sophisticated, make it engaging. You know, the world is so noisy, the digital world is so noisy, everybody's sharing blog posts. I actually wrote a blog called Anybody Can Write a Blog Post a few months ago, because everybody can write a 500-word blog post. We see it all the time. Definitely put your own angle spin on it. Use creative subheadings, you know, think of something that makes it unique to you. And actually that's the fun part, that's exciting. You know, there are so many templates and structures and so many sort of business books and stuff like that. I think we can afford to, you know, sort of think outside the box. Don't be afraid to sort of do something a little bit different. You know, the whole idea of storytelling is so relevant here. Start off with a story, make the whole thing a story, come up with a fiction story. You can create a fiction story with fiction made up characters and make it link to the product that you're offering. There are so many different things you can do if you just start looking outside of the box. But in order to get started, you need to really do your research, read as much content as you can, not necessarily other blog posts. In fact, I would go as far as saying, don't read other people's blog posts, read a fiction book, read a comic book, listen to a podcast. There are content ideas everywhere. There's inspiration everywhere. And that's the best part of writing, is that you're always inspired. So yeah, that would be my 2 pence on that.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Such great advice from you both. So I know we've got a few questions. Beth, I haven't been monitoring the chat very well. I've been seeing some lovely comments. Beth, do you want to ask the first question and then see whether we open it up to anyone else who might have questions for both Emma and Neely? I think she's there. Or Oliver, do you want to ask a question?
Yeah, I think Beth was on mute, sorry, but I can ask the first one.
Okay.
It's for Neely. And how do you keep content guest focused? even when you're talking about yourself. And so, for example, on our site, it would be the about section. Talk
That's
about
a
their
great
properties.
question. Yeah, it's a wonderful, that's a great question, because it's, yeah, again, it's, you want to talk about yourself and you want to talk about what you're offering, but you also want to make it relevant to your guests and not sound like you're being all, you know, me, which is such an easy trap to fall into. Again, it's very much kind of flipping the switch, sort of, it's very much a mindset thing. So for example, something as simple as on your website, when you have something like, read all of our wonderful 5-star reviews. So simple. Lots of websites have it. How can you then turn that into a benefit for your guests? So instead of saying something like, read our 5-star reviews, you could completely switch that and say, will you become our next happy guest? Make it about them. Okay, I do all of these amazing things, but what does that mean for you? I'm a writer. Yeah, that's great. But what does that mean for you? What can I help you with? When I introduce myself to people, I don't tell them that I create content or I write stories for their business. I always lead with the benefits. So I tell them that off the back of these stories, your guests will now build brand loyalty with you and keep coming back to spend money with your business over and over again. So I think make everything very much benefit focused. You know, if you're talking about a bed, what does that mean for your guest? It means a good night's sleep. If you're talking about, you know, an easy sort of check-in process, what does that mean for your guests? It means convenience. It means saving time. Even when you're talking about, it's basically just focusing on the benefits. So rather than, it's very basic sort of, you know, very common marketing advice, benefits over features. Always lead with the benefits, always lead with what does this mean for your guest? Keep asking yourself the question, so what? You know, we're based in across the most stunning landscapes in Scotland. Well, so what? What does that mean for your guests? You know, we've recently had our kitchens refurbished. Okay, so what does that mean for your guests? Always lead with benefits. Hospitality within itself is all about serving people. We have a beautiful saying in my culture, where my family's from, our Indian culture, and translated in English, it's the guest is God. And, you know, it's a beautiful saying. Obviously, it's metaphorical, and it's all about serving your guests. And actually, when you think about the content that you create, that's where it begins. That's where hospitality begins. Everything should be about serving your guests. It's not really an opportunity to talk about how amazing you are. Unfortunately, it's not about us. It's not really about the business. It's about how the business serves your guests. And once you understand that, I promise you, it will make such a huge difference. It is 100% guaranteed works. Make people feel special. Make them feel like they are the center of everything that you do. And they deserve that. If they're spending money with your business, then they absolutely should feel that way. And that is the core essence of hospitality as well. So yeah, that's how I would address that.
Brilliant.
Oh yeah, I'll definitely be taking that forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Oliver and Neely. That was such a great answer, and you know, it's so important. I mean, you know, I love the way you said, you know, do you want to be my next guest to write a testimonial? And that's sort of like, yeah, I'd like to, because people like sharing happy stories, don't they? And I really connecting with what you're saying there. So Megan, have you got a question for Emma?
Got to unmute myself. Yeah, so how do we ensure that I don't run out of ideas for content across other channels?
Yeah, it's definitely something that I think people can become overwhelmed with, certainly, especially when, you know, in a digital age, when so much is online. You've got your website, yes, but you've probably got email marketing, you've probably got a blog, you've probably got social media, all of these different channels. What I would say is, number one, plan is absolutely key, as boring as it is. You know, things like these themes through the year of stories, or events that are going on in your area, even the seasons of the year, if it's specific changes to the landscape around you, all of that can be built into a content plan. And the more you plan, the easier everything in your life gets. And it's definitely advice that I need to take for myself. I'm still not amazing at it for my own business, but I'm great at doing it for other people's. Another thing that I would say is, people tend to really multiply the amount of work that they have to do when they're thinking about things like content across channels. So there's going to be stuff in your website copy that could so easily be expanded into articles or into blog posts. I'm sure Neely's probably had this experience before whenever you're building out, this kind of well-rounded content strategy for people. And so say you write, one of these guides for, 10 reasons why you should visit my area, for example. You've got that as a blog. That could so easily be turned into 10 minimum social media posts as well. And that could so easily be turned into, I would argue, not one email, but at least 2, 3, maybe even 4 in a sequence to keep people engaged. So it's not about, doubling, tripling, quadrupling your workload with every channel that you take on for your business. It's just about working smart with the information that you've got and just repurposing things across different channels. Because I think the important thing with storytelling as well is that different people take on information in different ways. There are people who love to read, but there are people who love to listen. There are people who are much more engaged in visual presentation or video than they are with words. So I think it's just about having one core thing and then being able to think, well, how can I utilize this across different platforms with information I already have without, making my entire job content creation, because otherwise it could just very easily become your entire job. So that would probably be my advice on that.
Great.
Thank you.
Another fantastic answer. And we've got so many new skills that we're all going to be taking away after this. So I've just seen in the chat about Jill has very kindly put a link in about vlogs. Do you know anything about vlogs? Video logs? Are they presumably those video logs? Neely?
Oh, yeah, sorry, I wasn't sure if that was directed
Sorry,
to me. So
yeah.
no, it's fine. So yeah, vlogs. Yeah, I think it's like literally how Emma's just explained. It's about repurposing your content. So actually, if you've created a blog post, or if you have a content piece that's been written, to repurpose that in video form is so powerful. As Emma said, we all consume content in different ways. It's always a little bit different, presenting a script as opposed to writing something in terms of a blog post is completely different. It almost gives it a different meaning. It adds another layer to what it is that you're talking about. As you know, I'm a big fan of spoken word, and in my spare time, I perform a lot of poetry and spoken word, and I have throughout my career, and to help me build my own business, sometimes I'll create content and then I'll turn it into a poem, and then I'll present that poem and I will share that in a vlog format. And that's great because not only does it sort of tap into a very important part of my own personality, and when you do that, you immediately connect with people because you're almost showing a vulnerability, which is beautiful. There's nothing wrong with that. And it's different, it's completely unique. I don't really see many other people doing it. So I think lots of people do say that they're better speakers, they'd rather talk than they'd write. So, if that's your jam, then absolutely go with that instead. Do more of that. It will really help you build your confidence. And actually presenting and vlogging is an excellent way of improving your writing skills too. If you're a great speaker, you'll eventually, you'll brush up on your writing skills too, and vice versa. So yeah, definitely nice idea.
Gosh, I've so enjoyed that, Neely and Emma. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
And we'll pop this up on our Private House Days video page, so you'll be able to share it. I'll get James to do that later. But thank you so much, and have a great day, everybody.
Thank you.
Okay, take care.
Bye.
Bye.